Okay, so I'll get us started today. Awesome. Tyler and Alex, you've got your video on, so I can see you. That's great. My name is Donna Jaja. I am a youth engagement designer with the Great Waters Challenge. So welcome to everyone who's joined us and everyone who'll be watching this at a later moment to the first webinar of the Great Waters Challenge. And it's the first in a series that will be happening, but this is the only public one. The other ones are only accessible to the players. So make sure to sign up as a player to the Great Waters Challenge if you want to continue receiving these webinars and playing the challenge. Just to start off and share with you that part of my role with Waterlution, and I've been with Waterlution, who is behind the Great Waters Challenge for over 5 years now, working on multitudes of projects. And this by far is one of the more exciting ones for me because of the intention of really getting together youth from across Canada. So it's quite an ambitious project, getting youth involved from provinces and territories across Canada on a topic that is so dear to our hearts, which is, of course, water and water stewardship. But we're doing a kind of a really cool twist to it. We're designing the whole process as an online participative game. It's not a video game, just to be clear. So the Great Waters Challenge is an online participative game that youth can participate in. And I'll speak a bit more about the timeline, about the challenges, and how it will all work out in a second. And I'm very, very happy and honored and really stoked to have the Water Brothers on this call with us. The Water Brothers, Alex and Tyler Mifflin, are also prize partners for the Great Waters Challenge. They've offered some awesome prizes that I'll show in a bit. And they are behind the Eco Adventure series, the Water Brothers. And they have, I'll let them speak about that in a bit, but and I'm sure a lot of you already know who they are. You've probably engaged with their stuff and watched their videos and films online. Their work has been wonderful, and their tie to what we're trying to accomplish with the Great Waters Challenge is very aligned in the sense that they've gone on adventures in communities across Canada and other parts of the world too, and they've uncovered some stories about, you know, what has happened on these waterways and in these watersheds historically, but also in the present moment, and maybe even an outlook on what's going to happen in the future. And they deliver all of that in really cool episodes. So before I hand it over to Tyler and Alex, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the Great Waters Challenge. And then we will have at the very end of the webinar space for all of your questions to be answered. And then we'll get some tips also from Alex and Tyler in terms of how the players can share the information and their reflections on the challenges in a very cool way and effective way based on their experience. So to begin with, I also want to add that the Great Waters Challenge is part of many initiatives taking place across Canada in lead up to celebrating Canada's 150th anniversary, which is on July 1st, 2017. So it's mainly funded by the Government of Canada. And if you go to our partners page, you'll get a long list of all the wonderful partners that have come on board of the Great Waters Challenge from all provinces and even territories across Canada. But I won't get into that right now. So we'll keep it to sharing with you a little bit more about how the Great Waters Challenge will unfold. So a quick overview of the timeline shows you that although we're announcing that the Great Waters Challenge officially opens today, really the first challenge won't be released until September 29. So that's Thursday, September 29. And we decided to keep the deadline for registration open for a few days after releasing the first challenge. So the deadline is October 3rd. Okay, so the deadline is October 3rd. And then every 2 weeks from the date of the first challenge, we will be releasing the next challenges. So you'll see on the timeline, we've got the next challenge October 13th, another one on October 27th, and the last challenge will be November 10th. The final deadline for level 1, so for all the players involved in level 1, we're expecting that all these challenges would have been completed by the date of November 24th, with a webinar that we will host celebrating what's been accomplished by all the players and all the awesome stories that have been shared, and then closing off level 1. The winners for level 1 will be announced on December 15th, and they will be selected by our youth advisory board. I'll mention the youth advisory board in a second. I'll come back to it. And then we'll enter into level 2. Okay, so level 2 is from January to July 2017. For anyone who completes level 1 of the challenge, you're able, if you complete it successfully and fully, even if you're not a top winner, you will be able to proceed to level 2. Level 2 is much more hands-on, and it will involve you delivering 2 challenges in your community. So just a quick overview of the timeline is that by mid-February, we ask that you've formed some local team to support you. We'll have regional workshops for training in mobilizing community and engagement. And then let me move back up. And then the last piece to it will be the delivery of 2 community-based pieces. One is called Curious Waters, and it's designed more so as a scavenger hunt for elementary age students and their parents. And the other one is Water Celebration Corridors, which is designed to engage high school students, grades 11 and 12. And that one specifically will be about animating intersections and streets in your community and neighborhood to uncover and share the stories of what has happened in terms of water in the community. So really, really cool initiatives, and they will involve your engagement, but we'll get to the level 2 piece later on. So first, you have to make sure you manage to get through level 1. I'll talk a bit about our youth advisory board. So they've played a crucial part in designing this challenge, in getting all the partners on board, in fundraising over $7,000 worth of prizes for all the top players to win. And they represent 7 provinces and 2 territories from across Canada. So if you go on our website, there's a link to all of their profiles. And I'm going to ask that if we have any of the Youth Advisory Board members on the webinar to please say hi, maybe in the chat box or to me. All right, we'll move on quickly to here. If you're looking for a little more information about level 1, you'll be able to get that, just a general overview of every challenge that we'll release and the estimated time needed. Of course, that time varies depending on every player, but that is there for you to reference. And then when you're ready to register, if you haven't registered yet, and as I mentioned, registration closes on October 3rd, we have 2 options, okay? So this is the really cool part that I want to share with you, is that now we have a school team registration option, and that is a parallel process with separate prizes that we are running at the same time as all the players who are completing the challenges. So you can register either as an individual player, or you can register as a school team. For school teams, it's really more relevant to elementary and high school, especially high school level teams. And we're asking that you sign on under the teacher's name. However, we've had requests of youth who have said, well, can we have a team leader who's not a teacher and that they sign us on? Yes. I do ask that you please email me at Donna. I'll share my email with you in the chat box, donna@waterlution.org, just to make sure that, you know, age-wise and detail-wise, we're good to go, okay? So if you don't have a teacher or an adult, please email me first to confirm that you can join as a school team. the Great Waters Challenge is for anyone under the age of 30 years and living in Canada. So it's youth under 30 years of age living in Canada who can apply. All right, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to now just give you, the chance to share any questions that you might have from, before or building up in the Q&A while I hand it over to Alex and Tyler so they can share with us a couple of stories from experiences on their adventures that are connected to what the Great Waters Challenge is trying to accomplish, which is to showcase the connection between water and how it has shaped our identity as people and as communities, diverse communities living on different watersheds and near different waterways. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Donna, and hello everyone. I'm Tyler, and this is my brother Alex.
Hey.
And as Donna mentioned, we are the creators and hosts of the Water Brothers Eco Adventure documentary series. For the last 5.5, 6 years, Alex and I have been really fortunate to get to travel around the world making documentaries about some of the biggest water challenges of our time. And really what we do is we use water as a vehicle to talk about big environmental challenges, things like climate change, overfishing, the health of our oceans, the decline of coral reefs. Lots of big sort of sometimes can seem overwhelming and challenging issues to solve, but we look at them through the lens of water because water is what connects us all. It's what connects us from people halfway across the globe. It connects all Canadians, and it really connects us with past and future generations as well, because what we do to water, how we treat water, has lasting implications, and unfortunately we can pollute water to the point where it becomes unusable or very unusable for future generations to grow food, to use it for drinking water and for creating products, all sorts of things. So we're really thrilled to be working with Waterlution on the Great Waters Challenge because it's such an amazing tool and resource to connect Canadians, particularly youth, across the country, our big country, with so much diverse water landscapes. We border on 3 oceans.
The world's longest coastline.
Exactly, and just countless numbers of lakes and rivers in our country, which we're so fortunate to have, which really has unfortunately led to a lot of people, because they think we have such an abundance of water, that we don't manage it and use it as properly, as efficiently, and as respectfully as we should. So that's what we're so thrilled to be working with the Great Waters Challenge, is to connect these stories, to connect people from our large and diverse country, to bring these water stories together, to really show people how we are connected through water, and how many people maybe on the East Coast or the West Coast, different oceans, but they'll have very similar stories about what the oceans mean to them, what their freshwater resources mean to them. So we're really thrilled about that, and I know Alex can talk a little bit about some of the stories that we've seen, that we've encountered, about how important water is to people's lives in Canada.
Yeah, I think just first of all, the biggest thing to talk about is just how unique Canada is in terms of fresh water. We're often taught, we have 20% of the world's fresh water supply, and that is correct, but it's what's more important to think about is our renewable fresh water supply. So that's the water that gets replaced through rainfall and precipitation across this country. So when you look at just renewable freshwater supply, we only have about 6.5% of the world's total renewable freshwater supply. A lot of our fresh water is locked up in ice. It's in lakes in the boreal forest and in the Arctic that don't really receive a lot of rainfall, and so they're sort of like fossil water, like the water that's there. If it were to evaporate, if northern parts of Canada were to continue to warm, we would lose a lot of that water. It wouldn't necessarily be renewed. So like Tyler was saying, we have a lot less water than we think. And there's lots of things that we do have to we do that are very impressive. The number of lakes, over 3 million lakes in this country. Actually, there's so many lakes in Canada that there's not an actual precise number. No one has ever been able to say, it's that many, like we have this many lakes. It's somewhere between 3 and possibly 7 million lakes, depending on what your parameters are, whether that's a pond or a lake or, what's your size. But either way, it's a lot. We have we have a lot of water, which makes us really special from a global perspective. But it also, we think of it as a huge responsibility because there's not many other countries that have so much water and so much clean fresh water, and that puts us in a pretty unique position to really set an example, not just to other Canadians, but to the whole world, to position ourselves as true leaders in water stewardship. Spending the last 5 years traveling across Canada, the United States, and the world, there's been a lot of stories we've encountered. And although over half of all of our episodes take us outside of the country, one of the reasons we do focus on global issues, not just because water issues are all global, it's really to show Canadians as well that the challenges faced by communities on other sides of the world are actually related to us right here. Either we face the same challenges, whether it's the lack of access to clean water and sanitation, or some of the food we buy or the clothes we wear is made in other parts of the world where if you need to think about it, because the clothes you're wearing could be polluting water sources on the other side of the world. So we are connected to global water issues. But when it comes to Canada, certainly there's a lot of stories to share. I mean, we've shot episodes on algae blooms and eutrophication, which leads to a phenomenon known as dead zones. And we did an episode about that, which is a huge problem across Canada. This is when lakes get too many nutrients in them, so like things like phosphorus, and that can lead to big algae blooms, which sometimes can be toxic to humans, to wildlife. And they can also deplete water of oxygen, and that's happening right across this country. It's a big problem in Canada. We dealt with it back in the 70s, and we solved a lot of these problems in lakes like Lake Erie, but a lot of them are back again. So we haven't fully solved those problems, and there's stories that we've encountered of people who've lost pets because they've drank from water, like a lake, a beach that had a toxic algae bloom. And again, with access to clean water and sanitation, I think one of the most important stories that Canadians need to be aware of is the lack of access to clean water and sanitation that exists in this country. We are extremely fortunate in this country to have really clean, safe tap water that we can rely on to be safe and clean almost all the time. But at the same time, we do have a lot of communities that don't have reliable access, and it's disproportionately affecting First Nations communities. And we've gone to several First Nations communities right across the country and seen how a disconnect between different levels of government, between nearby communities, between First Nations has caused a lot of their clean water and sanitation infrastructure to really just fall apart, or it never really was installed in the first place. So we have those stories that we can certainly talk a lot about. But I think what's really fascinating is, from a Canadian perspective, is how water has really shaped us as a nation in a unique way. I mean, whether you go back to the very first explorers to Canada and how they got across, how Canada was explored was through water. It was by canoe, it was by rivers, by lakes, and it was our incredible abundance of lakes and rivers which allowed explorers to go penetrate deep into the country, far deeper than would have been possible if there weren't as much fresh water. So there's that, historical perspective. But I think when you come, and when you want to go even further back in time, actually, our country is unique in another way, is that the actual landscape was shaped by water. Of course, rivers shape the landscape everywhere, but in the case of Canada, if you go back to the end of the last ice age, 12,000 years ago, as the ice sheet retreated across Canada, our whole country was essentially covered in ice. As it retreated across the country, it actually shaped the landscape. So you have rock formations, valleys, lakes that have been left behind from the last ice age. So unlike
the Great Lakes, literally are just puddles left behind from the last ice age.
They're very big puddles, but yeah, they are. So from this, like an Earth history perspective, Canada is unique in that sense as well, that our entire landscape, every rock beneath your feet, just about has been shaped by retreating glaciers and by receding water. So that's pretty unique, and that's pretty special. But if you just come to the modern day, I think that every Canadian has a water story to share, and I think they're whether it's if you're a lake, going camping, going to summer camp, just going on holiday, whether it's just going down to a beach, or if you have cottages or cabins or whatever it may be. A lot of at least for us and for a lot of other Canadians, some of our fondest memories are shaped by our clean freshwater lakes, our abundance of lakes, our millions and millions of lakes, and each lake is unique and different, and there's such an incredible diversity of freshwater ecosystems as well, and freshwater wildlife. But I just say, from a human perspective, I think every Canadian has a different story to tell, and a lot of our like I said, in the case of us, a lot of our fondest memories are, catching frogs down by the lake, and looking for wildlife, going canoeing, and even if you haven't had a chance to explore Canada's incredible abundance of lakes and freshwater ecosystems, I think that even in our own backyard, even here in the city of Toronto, there's a lot of amazing ways that people are touched by water, and have a lot of really amazing stories to share.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think is so great about the Great Waters Challenge, is that it's encouraging youth to create these stories, to speak to older folks, hear their stories about how we think about water, how we treat water has changed over time, to give them some perspective. I talk to kids all the time, and when something they often don't realize is, like, 15, 20 years ago, there was no such thing really as bottled water, and now it's so ubiquitous and everywhere. And we did a whole episode about sort of bottled water versus municipal tap water. So it's great that they're going to get a chance to share these stories with other youth, but also to speak with older generations, to hear about how things have changed through their lifetimes. Because there is a lot of changes happening, and that's one of the things that Alex and I really have seen with the documentaries we made is how much change is happening and the pace of change. One of the new episodes we're doing on our 4th season, which is going to be coming out in early 2017, is looking at how climate change is affecting Canadian rivers, lakes, waterways, and just seeing how serious the climate change is how it's going to be impacting us, not just in the Arctic, that, the ice sheets are melting and the sea ice is shrinking every year. It's how is it affecting everyday Canadians closer to home? And unfortunately, it's going to be affecting us in many ways, and already is affecting us in many ways, from reduced snowpack and glaciers, less fresh, which means less fresh water for a lot of the prairies, agricultural lands, less fresh water for hydro dams, which is a huge source of energy, electricity for Canadians. Lakes are warming. It's affecting fish populations in many different ways. We don't have time to get into all of it, but suffice it to say that climate change is happening now, and these changes are only going to increase. So I think it's really good that the participants in this game will get to speak to older generations and see how these things have changed. And when they go out and explore some of these stories and try and connect with their local watershed, they'll learn more about these challenges. And as they share these stories, they'll learn about other challenges in other parts of the country. And so it's a great opportunity to share stories and really learn in a fun and engaging way. And that's really what Alex and I were, since the beginning we came up with the show, was to really get everyone, but particularly youth, engaged in these issues and try and make them accessible and not boring and seem depressing, but get into the serious nature of the challenges we face, but also have some fun with it and show people that there are tons of solutions, and there's so many people across this country working to better protect our oceans, better protect our freshwater resources, in government, private sector, everyday citizens, and there is a lot. We have a lot of hope that we're going to be able to overcome a lot of these challenges. I think things will probably get a little bit worse before they get better, but I do believe that we are going to overcome these challenges. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important that we get all Canadians engaged in water issues, more aware of the threats to their local watersheds and also watersheds right across the country, because we do have some really big challenges. And although we are do, like, we as a country, we are good, at managing freshwater resources. We aren't great. I wouldn't position us as, say, global leaders who are really setting the right example for the world, for a country that is so fortunate to have such an abundance and incredible diversity of fresh water. Whatever the issue you want to look at when it comes to water, we're facing it right here. I know I mentioned that earlier, but whether it's access to clean water and sanitation, we have communities that are facing those problems. Water infrastructure, we're all, vast majority of Canadians are very fortunate to have really good water infrastructure, really good wastewater treatment, clean tap water coming to their homes. But a lot of our infrastructure is now aging. And in the next, 20 to 25 years, we're going to have to replace almost all of our big water infrastructure, the pipes beneath our feet, upgrading water treatment plants. And this is going to require a huge investment, and it's going to be up to, all Canadians to pitch in on that. And we need to be aware of the scale of the challenge we're facing, if we're all going to band together and be able to solve it. Another big challenge, plastic. A lot of people know about things like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, but a lot of people in Canada know about this, and that plastic is building up in the ocean. But not as many Canadians are aware of the fact that we have our own garbage patches right here in Canada, in the Great Lakes. The same scientific studies that have been done to measure the abundance and distribution of plastic in the Pacific Ocean, in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, those same scientific methods have been used in the Great Lakes, and in Lake Erie, and in parts of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, they found even higher concentrations of plastic in those waters. And so we are big time users of plastic. We're big time disposers of plastic. So we can do a lot to solve those problems, those global problems right here, and we can set an example for the world on how to solve them. When it comes to just consuming fresh water, we're one of the biggest per capita water users in the world, over 350 liters per person per day, which puts us, I think, right behind the United States and some other, small countries. But in terms of sort of like big developed nations, we're like right there at the top. We have really water intensive diets. We eat a lot of our diets. We eat a lot, and we eat a lot of things that require a lot of water to grow, such as beef. So, there's ways that we can, shift our food production systems. Food production uses in Canada, about 60 to 70% of all of our freshwater resources. So we could get a lot better about and how we manage fresh water on farms, and about how Canadians choose to eat. And a lot of the solutions aren't just better for our planet and for our water resources, they're also better for our health as well when we really delve into it. So whether it comes to food, pollution, biodiversity, just wildlife in general, there's so many different reasons and ways that there's so many different ways that we can become a lot better and become global leaders in water stewardship. And the Great Waters Challenge is definitely something that's going to really help with that and really bring Canadians together to share those stories. I think we've already talked plenty now. I know we'll just keep going on unless you cut us off. So we'll I hope that gives you a good little breakdown of who we are and some of the issues we look at and how it relates to sort of the story of water in Canada. But we're happy to answer any questions you have about our show, the stuff we've looked at, just water in general in Canada, any questions you have that you think might help you with the stories you decide to pursue, and maybe there's something we can share that will help you out. But we're happy to answer any questions.
Any tips on filming videos or creating good sort of content that will be a big part of this challenge. So we're happy to answer some questions and give you some advice from the many mistakes we've learned along the way.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex and Tyler, so much. Sitting there listening, and you've really left us with a lot of things to think about, a lot of topics to consider in terms of the lens to look or to enter into the challenge with. You've talked about access to clean water, you've talked about infrastructure, you've talked about recreation, climate change, biodiversity, water use, even our water footprint, plastic and pollution, and you shared a bit more of history. So really, water is so interconnected and it crosses so many areas, and we have a lot to look at, like in terms of lenses for water in our communities in Canada. So the biggest question, and I loved what you shared, which is that a lot of change is happening. And our purpose with the Great Waters Challenge is, how do we engage youth in a way for them to decide how to be part of this change that is happening. The change is inevitable, but how can we become more empowered and more informed and more engaged to decide what kind of water future do we want for Canada? How do we want, water to continue to shape our identity, and what kind of identity do we want to have? And I loved, again, the idea of positioning Canada as a global leader. But it all starts with us on an individual level, and how we engage with these topics. So thank you for that. And having touched on that, while I wait for some questions from our participants on the webinar, and you're welcome to, I'll just quickly tell you that there's a Q&A box in an option bar that you should have at the top. And if you click on the Q&A, you can then send your questions through that. And while we're waiting, I'm going to ask you the question of, can you please share with us some of your learnings? Because one important piece is that all the players will be reporting on their challenge completion via a blog. And for anyone who's not familiar with blogging or how to create a blog, you can go on our website on multiple areas, and even on the sign up page to sign on as a player, we have an information page on how to create your own blog. Really simple process. So for those who are new to this and new to communicating online, even though we live in a world of social media, so it shouldn't be that new, but maybe blogging, you've never done it before. So Alex and Tyler, share with us some of the ways that you think would be most effective and most fun and creative to communicate online, to audiences, to other players, but especially to share stories. You're the experts on this. You collect information, gather stories, and then you tell them back to us in a very creative, visually appealing way. Not all the players will have access to a lot of, technology to get this done, but given, what are the options? So spur our creativity.
Well, there's many different ways. I think nowadays, you can create amazing content with your phone. You got a camera there, you can record audio, you can write on blogs through there. So I think what's important for youth is to do some research and find the stories that they want to tell, things that maybe impact them on a personal basis. So find a story that you are passionate about, that impacts you directly, and I think that'll really be a good kickoff, because it just you have sort of some personal investment in that story. And I think that'll really resonate with other players of the game when, you're sharing your stories and they want to check out other stories. And so I think talking about things that are really matter to you, that are personal and that are impacting your sort of community where you live, that's a great place to start. In terms of some tips for actually filming, tripods are great. That no one really likes to look at shaky video, although everyone will put up with it. But one of the things that is really, really important for creating sort of audio video content is the audio. One of the things with audio is that no one really pays attention to it unless it's bad audio, and if it's bad, it's impossible to watch. As I said, people can put up with shaky camera movement. That's totally fine. But if your audio is is subpar and it's really scratchy, or there's lots of background noise or tons of wind, it is almost impossible for people to get through and watch that. So that would be one of my main tips, is audio is more important than you probably think it is. So if you're creating video content, really focus on making sure that you record it somewhere where you can get good audio. Just doing it off your phone is fine, but don't do it in the middle of busy traffic downtown, or right when a crazy windy day, because you're probably not going to get good content. So that's a really important piece of advice that many people overlook. Again, for creating content, whether it's writing or for video, shorter is usually always better. And that's something that Al and I, we're in our edit suite right now, putting together one of our new episodes. And, it's always a challenge of bringing it down to 25 minutes, is how long our episodes are. We sort of overshoot a lot of things, and that's always the challenge, is trying to bring it down to make it entertaining, exciting, get all the information we want in. But nowadays, with everyone's attention spans are really short, so shorter is better, and it is a challenge to try and get your message across, get the key points and facts in that you want, and do it in a short and concise way as possible. So that's shorter is always better. So try and keep it short and concise and fun. Have some fun with it. That's another thing too. I mean, what's the point of living if you can't have some fun and laugh once in a while, right? So try and infuse some humor into your stories. That will go a long way. People always enjoy that. Don't be afraid to make fun of yourself. Get in some embarrassing moments. That for us, that makes good TV. So that's another piece of advice that I would give to all the players of the game.
Yeah, and then I guess look at the threats to your local watershed. I mean, there's so much water all around us. Focus on stories that really think about your favorite memories about water, and maybe there's a favorite watershed or lake or river that really means a lot to you, and maybe you can tap into that sort of that connection you have, and maybe that can help inspire you to find out what the biggest threat to that watershed may be, and communicate that. I'd say what was, I'm trying to think of what was the other thing I was going to say about tips.
Do your research.
Yeah, do your research. Yeah, and then just short is good. What was I going to say? Do you have any other tips?
Yeah, no, it's always have fun with it if you can. As you said, keep it short and concise is always better.
Oh, and solutions. Yeah, really focus on solutions. Because it's really easy to point out bad things. There's a lot of problems with how we manage water, and there's a lot of threats to water, and so there's no shortage of problems you could focus on. But right from the start, find out what maybe you even want to start out what's the solution you really want to highlight, and then work backwards from there. So what's the big thing you want to highlight that's going to solve that problem that you may be talking about, or just think of your ending and then work backwards. That might be a way to help you get over that hurdle of what story do you want to tell. That may help you.
I'm just going to quickly step in and share that with the challenges, what we're asking the players, it's really, it's been designed for success. It's been designed for everyone who engages with the challenges to be able to interpret them in their own context and in their own way, in a way that makes sense to them, where they find that personal connection. And the tips that you shared are great. And I also just want to add to it is, how do you, what's your best advice on creating stories, right? So they do the research, they gather the information, they're out in the community and maybe interviewing somebody about, the waterway or something like that. And how do they then tell that story, especially if, for instance, creating a video or something like that isn't an option, and they have to blog about it and maybe share some photos, which is also an option. Blogging, what are your tips? Of course, shorter is better, but some ideas on how do we create that story arc?
Well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to blogging, I mean, maybe you just find that personal connection, but also you'd want to find a thread to that story that's going to really hit home for a lot of people. So you want to find that personal connection that might be to a specific watershed, but maybe you want to open up your blog or your video or whatever you decide to do to talk about the bigger issue at hand. So, maybe it could be, one small, mining project or one development or one small story about a specific lake, but maybe you want to open it up and then share another small story that relates to why that specific story that you're focusing on would matter to more Canadians. So, so just think about the small picture and the big picture at the same time, and really trying to bring in as large of an audience you can, and really, like, why should I care, or why should I care about that particular story? Always think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's another thing. When Alex does all the research and writing for the show, and we do a lot of brainstorming, working together, particularly with a couple of the writers. But whenever Al's coming up with an idea, and we just Alex and I are always very passionate about the environment, but a lot of people, aren't as much as we are. And one of the exercises we sort of do is just ask the question, why does anyone care? Why does anyone care about this? And not just for intrinsic, oh, I like nature. No, but how does this affect people's lives? Why does your story going to matter or make a difference to anyone else? And start with that, and just sort of work, as Al said, work backwards. That can be a useful tip, not just to be harsh on yourself, but just to get to boil down what you want to get across, and come up with a solid theme or message, and figuring out why that your story would be impactful to other Canadians and other players of the Great Waters Challenge.
Thank you. So we've got a couple questions here coming in. And I've got a question from Landon. Let's see. So Landon loves what's going on here. And so do we, Landon. And he's asking, so what is the objective? So what's the objective of the Great Waters Challenge? And that may have been missed as we were sharing earlier, saying that really the essence is to connect youth as agents of change across communities, across Canada, in understanding how water has shaped their identity, but the identity of their community. So really engaging in an interactive process to look at what's happened, and to look at what will happen, and to look at what kind of role every player or every person involved in the Great Waters Challenge can play to influence what is happening in their communities and what the threads are that are connecting Canada as a whole. So it's very much of an educational perspective, and it's an objective, and it's really about handing that torch of inviting the youth themselves to take their learning into their own hands and do it in a fun way. And finally, in the very end, there's that direct community action. So they're not only learning for themselves, they're learning to share and to engage and involve others in their community. So why do it? Why do the challenge? Well, it depends for every person, but from our end, it's really because it's a fun process. There's so much to be gained on a personal level, and a lot of opportunity to impact as well by joining and by playing as a player. And there are tons of prizes to be won. So that is a big incentive. If nothing else, of course, those who are joining as players, I know that the intention will be beyond just winning the prizes, but hey, who doesn't love winning a prize at the end of hard work? And so a couple more, how big are teams for level 1 and level 2? So level 1, it's only for school teams that sign up. They can be as big as the team is. So if it's a class of 20 students, it could be 20. You sign up under one account, but you would let us know how many students are participating. In level 2, we'll talk about that more later, but it's about as big as the individual player is able to make their team and is comfortable working in that team. So it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 people supporting. Let's see. Okay, question to Alex and Tyler. How long do you recommend videos to be?
You know, honestly, I'd say it depends on the scope of your story, but I would say if you can keep your videos under 5 minutes for sure, that would be good. The short, as you said, shorter the better. I'd say if you can try and do them maybe 2 minutes, aim for 2 minutes. You know, just think of like when you're, you know, when you're online watching YouTube videos, if videos go on too long sometimes, and they're not, you know, taking a while to go on, you kind of get bored and you might just, you know, check out another video. So shorter is better just to keep people's attention span, and it's good exercise in getting your story out and really getting the key facts out in as quick and effective way as possible. So there's no set limit or max limit, but again, as sort of general rule, I'd say shorter is better, and have some fun with it. You know, try and be goofy, be silly. People like that. It's always a sort of fun way to tell your stories about how you are connected with your watershed or whatever story you're looking to tell.
I think Landon just said very quickly, sorry you cut out on the time recommendation. So could you just repeat that part? Time recommendation.
Less than 5 minutes. If you're doing like YouTube videos, yeah, definitely you want to keep it under 5 minutes. For sure. Like, because like once you go over 5 minutes, then it's very hard to create a YouTube video that's over 5 minutes without like a bunch of money and some resources available to you. It would be tough to do that. So Tyler was just saying shorter is better. More likely under 3 minutes would probably be a better you know, bar to set.
Cool. So
and
another
then, we have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, we see another question here. Could we hear a water story from each of you? What are your individual water stories? Well, one water story that we share is sort of like one of our earliest memories about, like, you know, water pollution that sort of impacted us directly. I mean, we grew up in the Beaches neighborhood of Toronto, which is right near the steps from Lake Ontario. That's the home that we grew up in. And when we were kids, there was times when you couldn't go swim in the lake, and you know we'd go swimming in lakes and freshwater, you know, all the time in Ontario. Yet the biggest lake one of the biggest lakes in the entire province, we couldn't swim in whenever we wanted. So that was sort of one of our first experiences. Like, why would that be? Why would, you know, this giant lake not be able to swim in it sometimes? So that was one of the first times that we ever said, oh, okay, like,
water can be polluted.
Yeah, and in Canada it can be polluted. I think we had maybe known, like, okay, in other parts of the world that's a problem, but right in our own backyard. And obviously since that time, you know, the Lake Ontario has been cleaned up a lot. The Great Lakes, you know, the provincial and federal government have done a lot to clean up the Great Lakes. They are really, you know, getting closer to be able to swim, drink, and fish in them when we want. But there's still a long way to go. I think we definitely need, and hey, this could be a story that some of you might want to look into about, you know, what the city of Toronto and the province of Ontario is doing to make sure that our lakes are, you know, that we can swim, drink, and fish in the Great Lakes, and really all lakes across the country. Because, you know, there's some times when the city of Toronto doesn't share enough information with the public about what times when raw sewage might be entering the lakes after heavy rainstorms. You know, they don't, after the Labor Day weekend, I believe, I don't think there are any more there's no more testing being done in Lake Ontario. So this weekend, if we get another, you know, September heat wave, which happens, people are going to go down to the lake, and there's no testing being done. So if there were to be a problem with, you know, E. coli contamination along a stretch of beach, there's no real way set up. There's no real protection measures set up through the city of Toronto to warn people about that happening. These instances are a lot more rare than they used to be, and we're not discouraging people from swimming in the lake. But you know, we do need the full cooperation of our government to warn us if there was a problem. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if we get more people pushing on that. So that could be another thing that people look at. And it's certainly a story that really, one of the first times it really sparked our interest in you know, water pollution and water stories in Canada.
Okay, great. I just want to point out we're almost out of time.
Yep.
So I'm going to just address one last piece that people are curious about, and that is in terms of the prizes of the Great Waters Challenge. So I mentioned earlier that Tyler and Alex have sponsored some of the prizes. And just to note, since they're here with us, we've got clean canteen water bottles that are branded with Water Brothers logo available to the winners, as well as I'm going to scroll down to the level 1 school team prizes. And they're offering 3 sets of their DVDs, all seasons 1 to 3, which are an incredible educational tool to be used in classrooms. And so that is something up for grabs for school teams to win. We have a list that is growing of prizes that we're sourcing from partners across the country. So you'll see we've got Patagonia on board with a backpack and a jacket, Roots Canada with gift cards, Toronto-based from the City of Toronto, and Live Green Toronto. They've provided us with some other prizes that are locally based. If you're in Quebec, you've got your prize there. So lots here. Now what I really want to share is the top prize for that player who sticks it through to level 2 and is performing incredibly well, doing above and beyond. And they will be sponsored as one of 2 Canadian delegates at the next General Assembly of the World Youth Parliament for Water, which will be happening in Brazil in 2018. And it's timed just around the same time as the 8th World Water Forum. So it's an incredible opportunity for youth leadership, being involved in this, taking all of your learnings through the Great Waters Challenge about stories from across Canada and showcasing it to youth from other parts of the world, and also having a say in global water affairs. So that is the golden prize, and then we've got a silver prize and a bronze prize, and again the list is growing, so it's not finalized. So on that note, if we have any other questions, what I will do is we will have a Q&A page on our website, and so we'll try and address all questions, and we hope that you're going to be keen enough to sign up. This is the moment to register. On our homepage, a quick link takes you through to the form, and it's an easy breezy process to sign up. You'll just need to have a blog, which is, again, easy to set up. We've got an information paper document on that. Great. Tyler and Alex, I want to thank you so much for your contribution, for supporting the Great Waters Challenge, for encouraging youth out there to sign up as players. Looking forward to using some of your episodes as resources on our or throughout our challenges, and we'll be in touch. Thank you all for joining the webinar, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget that the deadline to register is October 3rd. Have a good one. Bye-bye.